Welcome to Product Academy Tough Stuff, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get straight to the toughest challenges in product management. I'm Tanya Lau.
And I'm Francesca Cortesi.
In each episode, we tackle one tough question. No fluff, no filler. Just candid insights from seasoned product leaders.
Our guests deliver actionable, real-world answers. Whether you're an experienced product leader or just stepping into the product world, this is your go-to podcast for sharp, tested advice, condensed for your busy schedule.
One tough challenge, practical insights, short and real.
Let's dive in. Hello, Erik, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So this conversation today is about product strategy, and it actually started in your office in Stockholm, where you and I were sitting in front of oh my God, like today I have so jet lag I cannot even speak. Whiteboard was the word. In front of a whiteboard, and we were talking about how do we actually make sure that product has a big contribution in the company and it doesn't become a clash with other people working in the company. So today's topic is product strategy, and I want you to share on record with our tough stuff listeners how you do it, because I think you do it in a really cool way. So can you start by telling us how do you approach product strategy?
Well, thanks, Francesca. There are some preconditions around it, but we can get to those later. And then I follow a framework for structuring the strategy. But I think in the end, it boils down to having a shared idea and insight across the different functions in the company about how a market is going and what customers need in that market. If you don't have that shared insight, you're going to struggle to create any kind of alignment, regardless of how good the strategy might be in itself. It's also about getting the buy-in to execute on it.
And I think we can all relate to it. Like the biggest struggle come like along the line when, you know, we have either different ideas of what like a goal is or different goals. So my question is, how do you create that shared understanding and that alignment from the beginning?
Right. So that might go into some of the common pitfalls, but I think that, there is a curse of best practices where things sound great when you read about them on a blog or listen to them on a podcast, but we very rarely talk about the context that they worked in, just that they worked great. And then you can kind of copy and paste, and people do this, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're super frustrated because it doesn't work. It doesn't produce the same results and it's not clear why. When it comes to product strategy, I think there are a couple of things to parse out in the beginning, and that one is that you should focus it around sellable products, and not features and domains, which is also common. I think that's sort of a bit of a different layer, but the alignment with the company is going to be around revenue, and then it will be around sellable products.
Can you give an example of like what you mean with the sellable product?
A sellable product will be listed, literally what is listed in your price list, or on your pricing page usually, or whatever the salesperson or product-led motion points to the deal that the customer signs in that. That is a sellable product. Or a hot dog if you go to 7-Eleven, it's a sellable product, but it's the same thing. And that's where the revenue happens in the end, right, is around these deals. I think a second complication is if it's a single or multi-product company. If you're a single product company, then the product strategy is the company strategy, more or less, right? Or extremely like dominant in it. If you have multi-product, you can have very different product strategies going, one for each, more or less. And then you might talk about platform strategies or other things that support having multiple products. And then you should consider the stage of product market fit. So if you have, for instance, a multi-product portfolio, you might have some in an early stage or some that are in the middle, at the really like peak part of their life cycle, or some at the end that need to be replaced or at least sunsetted. And so you're also a bit different kind of stages that requires different decisions strategically, and might also be valued in different ways, right? A really nascent product, you're not going to measure necessarily on revenue. It might just be on satisfaction and retention rather than how quickly you're making money on it.
So basically going back to what you said, of the curse of the best practice. So to understand where and to create that alignment to start with, that we talked about how to align the product strategy. So we need to make sure that, one, we're talking about hot dogs, as you were saying at the beginning. I mean, what's the hot dog we're selling? If we're selling one hot dog and then the hot dog and the hamburger, and then if we're just starting to sell them, or like we are well established. So all these things needs to be talked about from the beginning, and probably even different frameworks apply to them.
Certainly, but the most important thing is that you align this not just in product, which could actually be a first step, because you might not even have a shared idea about this in product, but then certainly with your commercial partners. So you end up talking about the same elements. The second part of this is and product needs to really understand the economic drivers of the business. Mm-hmm. So what drives what, and how does product contribute to that? Because that's how you end up being able to prioritize and agree on together with all stakeholders across commercial, with finance, with the board, and so on why would you do certain things over others, which a strategy has to boil down to in the end is also choosing what not to do. And it will be done on the basis of the economics. I
was thinking, like, the economic part, I think there is more and more talk about it in the product world, might be connected with the economic situation in general. But how do, like, the fact that everything is like profitability is becoming more and more important, much more than growth. And then it boils back to how do we make money and how do we make our product profitable? Yep. How do you align that? Like, both, you said you talked about aligning that in product and aligning that in general in the company. How do you work with that with your PMs, and how do you work with that with the general, with the management and the board?
Well, I think first is that you have to have a really clear owner directive, right? So the board has to be clear about where do they want to take the business. Is it profitability that's most important, which is a big theme right now that will end, I am sure. And I am seeing signals of that, where like the question is starting to seep in about where is growth. Because, the hunt for profitability, you reach diminishing returns, and I think we're kind of there now. But the way we align it is to build, following the Tre Sartorius model of using the outcome, opportunity, solution tree. We focus on the outcome part, and those are business outcomes, and we build a tree around business outcomes, right? So if the focus is on profitability, we look at what are the drivers of profitability, and say those are all individual outcomes that can be interesting for the business, and then look for opportunities below those. But you do the same for growth, right? So this doing a tree that starts in kind of the owner directive, and then build up opportunities, and then you can start talking about solutions. And what's great here is that you move the debating back and forth about what to have, or what to do, what to focus on, what to invest in, from the solution side much more, or up into the tree about which driver matters for us. Because I've been in so many meetings historically where I realized that people are like fighting over something like I want my thing, no, but I want my thing. And in the end, they both are right, because they're talking about two different drivers or outcomes. They actually have different incentives. And so they're never going to align that one is more, should have right away over the other. If they understand that one outcome is more important than the other to the board, then the discussion stops, and that's it. It's like a decision that makes itself.
A question, if I can challenge it a little bit, just a little bit, because obviously the board can give you direction on, okay, it's important to be profitable, or it's important to have this kind of growth. just to keep it like on a high level. But then they don't have many times the operational insights on how to do it. Let's say that they are right now focusing on profitability. And then how to get profitable can mean a lot of different things, right? And then that's where the different, the top of the tree that you were talking about might differ. Because for you, being profitable might mean double down on a certain product. And for me, being profitable will mean sign another customer, for example. Or there might be a third person with another perspective. So the board can like give you like the really highway, so to speak.
Totally.
But then you have a lot of road to choose from. And there, I think, becomes really interesting when it comes to aligning the organization. So which kind of road do we take? And how do you work with that part?
So I think when we do it most successfully, we we break down the outcomes. So let's say profitability or take that for this example. And then we find kind of the meaningful layer of like, these are like the sub drivers of that, right? And then we together look at what do we think are the best opportunities to drive that specific sub driver, right? And do that for each. And then we can look at that tree when we have kind of a bit of a long list, but it's not just a list, it's structured into a tree, right? And that allows that we won't cherry pick things in the list. We actually try to pick parts of the tree. That's the trick, right? To see like, okay, where can we land? Because usually there's like commercial consequences on which part of the tree you're in. There are technical consequences, which part of the tree, and so on. It allows you to create more thrust behind the decision if you choose up in the tree rather than go down into if you just did like, I think the trap here would do a list of initiatives and then give them some kind of ranking or rating or score. Which is a good model, but it hides all these things that become evident in the tree of what do they actually ladder up to and how might they support each other and make us be able to focus more as an organization rather than spread ourselves along a lot of different levers.
And when you say we, like we define like the top of the tree, who is we?
Around every sellable product, in my book, you have a product manager, and then you have the commercial stakeholders, which could be sales, marketing, account management, which are the classic ones. And because part of this is also going to be the go-to-market motion and how that works for all the changes, right? So you have to have this joint insight on, is this a real opportunity? Do we see it the same way? And do we value it the same way? And then we can start comparing them to each other, the different ones in what becomes the shared tree. Also, it's not just products tree, for instance. It's like, it's a work you do together. It's not something, you might not spend the same amount of hours, but it's built up together as a collaborative process and evaluated together. And then the conclusion is a joint conclusion in the end, in the best of cases.
I think this is super interesting because I've been working with my teams for a long time with opportunity solution trees as well. And I think there are several pitfalls that one can fall into. One of these is that the trees become the product team's tree or even the product trio's tree. And those trees become complicated, and sometimes I joke that they are like those sequoias trees, like in those national parks. They're so big, no one can really grasp them. And there is where you lose the stakeholders, because if you just like transparent, like we're transparent, here is our tree, but it's super complicated, and you have not had that discussion from the beginning of, do we see this opportunity and do we value this opportunity the same way? Then you're not going to have, back to the topic, you're not going to have your alignment. And what you shared with me that I want to also to have on record is, like, I think you do it brilliantly by having PMs and salespeople together go to sales meeting. Can you give a little bit of insight on how you build that common understanding of opportunities?
Sure. There are many ways that we meet customers, but doing it together with commercial stakeholders is really important. So we start to see the same patterns. It's the shared insight, because I think that, I worked in big organizations like Motorola, 100,000 employees. We'd have like research departments that generate fantastic research, super high quality, PhDs working on it, but it's a deck in the end that people will not really feel they understand at a fundamental, like, they can't internalize it completely. Like, they can read some of the superficial stuff, but it doesn't actually translate very well. Whereas if we'd go with the PhD and meet users or customers, and you talked about what you saw, that sticks for some reason, right? It's sort of this empathy, I think, is what we call it, right? But that shared insight is that we saw the same thing and we interpret it the same way, is extremely high bandwidth, replaces a million slides and decks and reports, and allows you to talk about, like, is this what we meant? Now we want the dashboard we talked about. That would really solve for this, wouldn't it? Yes, exactly. And you start talking about solution, problem, solution, problem, solution. But with this shared real life example of a user or a customer in mind. So we do it, structurally. We follow on sales meetings. We have part of our go-to-market is conferences. So the product people join the conference stand. Sometimes we help with the selling. We can be like a partner always, so they can join a conversation, help a salesperson, or funnel visitors in the stand to the salespeople. We know that we are there to make them successful, but we can also do research at the same time, which is great. And that seems to work really well together. We make sure we're not too many of us in the stand, etc. So we have good kind of like play well together as a team, right? And then another institutionalized thing we have is when we have churn customers. So then the head of account management and the PM for the product will interview all the churn customers. So there is, again, the shared insight. So it's not like product has its view and then pushes that on to commercial, or the other way around, because it won't work. You have to do it together, right? When you've seen the same thing, you need a very slim report, and also mostly like you kind of get like the impulse together what should happen, and you save a lot of time. It can feel like it takes a lot of time because you have to have these sort of work meetings with customers, but they actually, I can end up saving a ton of time.
But maybe some of the listeners are thinking about this question. I mean, this all sounds like ideal because you create the shared insight. But have you ever experienced a pushback from salespeople not to want to have product in the room? Or like,
Absolutely.
This is my customer, you shouldn't come here. And how do you deal with it?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. But that also goes back to... it's about relationships also internally, and you have to earn the trust. Can't be in every meeting. Some are too sensitive, or a salesperson is so new and they're not sure how to do yet, and they don't need another person there to kind of analyze what they're doing. No, to me it's about like I'm thinking of an account manager I've spent some time with, right? So we spend time before, during, and after the meetings, and we check in before, like, how can I help you with this specific customer? What are they looking for? Should I talk more about this or that, right? So it's make sure that the point is also that they should feel like they get value out of the meetings. Customers love this, by the way. In our case, they are super excited to have product in the room, and I always leave with the commercial stakeholder also being excited, because we talked about things they don't normally talk about, which is good, right? And it's a good relationship with the customer, with us as a company, because they get to see the full a wider gamut of what we are, and that we really listen and care and truly care, right? And many companies do, but they don't necessarily allow everybody to meet the customer, and I think can be a lost opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's like back to the alignment. That's what many times brings to mismatch in alignment, because people see, like, maybe you talk to different customers or the same customer in different context. And that leads to exactly what you were saying, to valuing a specific opportunity in a different way. And then will back impact the top of your tree, or how important is one part of the tree versus the other part of the tree. And there is where the misalignment starts to creep in.
Yeah.
So that I think it was also a little bit of a breath of fresh air, like hearing that the customer love to have product in the room. Like it can also be a pitch to anyone listening to have a little bit of a hard time getting into those meetings. That could be a way of feeling of making the customer feeling valued to be there. So what I take with me with our discussion on how to align product strategy, Erik, and then you can add if I missed anything, is one part it's about like the importance of focusing on what is the sellable product. What are we selling and which state are we and what is important that should come from the board and or the highest management. But then to be able to actually not trip into it, we need to have a tight collaboration with commercial from the beginning and building those opportunity solution trees together, not having like a tree done by the product trio and then treating commercial as a stakeholder. Is there anything that I've missed or that you want to add?
Oh, that sounds good.
Any piece of advice or anything that you want to give to people that are struggling aligning their product strategy?
Well, there's another way to look at it, which is it's a framework to kind of generically approach product strategies. Product strategy will be about how do we invest product resources and also, right? So you have the portfolio of sellable products, but then how do we invest product resources in that? And I think there are three main buckets that you can invest in. The first one I call reach, and it's about reaching new markets or reaching with your current product, or it's about reaching the current market but with new products, or it's the new markets and new products. So it's basically the answer of matrix, and it basically means more stuff, right? And oftentimes in product world it means building a lot. But this is a huge ARR driver, right? And most startups that's going like or scaling up the product part are building outreach. They're adding more use cases, they're adding more markets and so on. The second bucket is retention. So that's retaining your users and customers, but that also means retaining your money, right? And it's not a big point to invest heavily in reach if you don't have good retention. But retention is also super interesting. If you have high retention, you might be able to raise prices, which means more revenue. So reach is not the only way to add new revenue. Like I think retention is a bit misunderstood as like it's only about negatives, about covering poor retention. No, it can also be that you have great retention. That way you can raise prices. And retention to me mostly boils down to better stuff. Right. So if the reach is about more stuff, then retention is about better stuff. And it comes down to practically you have to break down, just like we break down any driver, right? If we want a business driver to be customer retention and ARR retention, you eventually go down to user retention. And then you have to look at, okay, how does retention happen? Will they come into the product? Okay, that's activation. Then they stay engaged with the product, which is engagement. And then you will still lose some customer users and they are churned, but can be reactivated until they actually leave the product completely. And so where do we want to work in there? And you keep going down. So you do kind of the tree exercise in retention to find the right place. And then the third area, which I think is where, I think the first two are like well understood by a board and commercial stakeholders, but the third one is where they would forget, which is pace over time. And this is where all debt happens. This is where automation and cost efficiency happens. It's basically the ability of the product team or the extended team, could also be in other teams as well, but how they are able to deliver at the same pace over time or faster with the same team, right? Or slower if you want to take a risk and build a bunch of tech debt because you want this giant feature set delivered at all costs at minimal time, but you're sacrificing your future. You're sacrificing pace for reach. That's a strategy. So between these three, you end up, I think, in a balanced strategy, in a bit more mature product. You're going to have to look at all three of these at the same time and have more like what is your stance? If you're in the beginning of a product journey, you might be very clearly and just trying to get very initial reach going, or especially retention. You're looking to make a product that people love, right? So you can monetize it and so on. But pace is going to quickly factor in. And I think that's also where some of the profitability aspects lie in the automation part. And that has helped me a lot organize what product can do for the company and build plans around it.
That's great advice. So that's something that you use together with the tree, like when you were discussing aligning on the top, like that's a further layer of alignment. Are we like focusing on activation, on retention, or maybe like the third part is more a constant dialogue, I guess? Like, are we sacrificing speed for scalability, or the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, pace does come up like but it might come more out of operations. So let's say most or common in B2B products is that sales scales linearly. So but you can start automating things behind sales or onboarding to lower the amount of people who have to be involved in every step of the journey. And that's a way to scale your go-to-market motion. But that needs comes out about operations. Otherwise, you need to constantly hire people behind your growth, right? And hiring people leads to overhead and more management and like slower company, and like, it's inherently not always great. So automating is good, but automating also takes time. Sometimes it's faster to hire people, and it gives you flexibility, and there might be other factors that play into it. So it's just not usually the one that will stand out until things are like falling apart. Then people be like, we can't do this another year, right? We have to fix this onboarding season or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so that's some good advice. I mean, the last part maybe is more for product leaders, how to start discussing and thinking and prioritizing and deciding on which way to take. While I think the trees, and especially how to also earn the trust with their commercial counterpart, is more like applicable to leaders as well, but maybe even for product manager working, or a senior product manager working on different products. That was some what I take with me, that next time I'll maybe use some AI to automate some tedious tasks, and then spend the time to create the trust with those stakeholders to make sure that there is alignment from the beginning.
Indeed, it's all about the relationships, either with the customers or with the stakeholders.
Yeah, people. That's like the good and the bad part of our job, I think. And on that note, thank you so much, Erik, for sharing your wisdom with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Francesca.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Product Academy Tough Stuff.
We hope today's tough question gave you practical, actionable insights.
If you enjoyed the episode, do us a favor and leave a rating or review. It will help us grow the podcast and make future episodes even better.
Got a question for us? Send an email to toughstuff@productacademy.ch and ask away. We read any submission and might answer yours in a later episode.
Thank you again for listening. We'll see you next time with another tough challenge to tackle.
Until then, take care.